Hello everyone, Shane here. I'm tired of people talking about trade deficits as if they're a bad thing. I know that's the current popular opinion, thanks mostly to politicians trying to mislead us and a mainstream media that doesn't know any better, but people need to understand what the trade deficit is and what it has to do with exchange rates. More importantly, they need to understand what it means for the dollar to drop in value and why that's disastrous. Let's take a look at a very simple version of a world economy.
Here in the U.S., we have Bob, who has a taste for genuine German chocolate. Over in Germany, we have Hans, who loves Wisconsin cheddar cheese. Bob wants to order $100 of chocolate from Germany, and Hans wants 100 euros of cheese from Wisconsin. In order for Bob to buy the German chocolate, he needs to find someone willing to trade his dollars for euros. Hans has a similar need, only he needs to exchange euros for dollars. This is perfect. Bob and Hans exchange $100 for 100 euros, and the exchange rate is 1-to-1. But what if Hans only wants 80 euros worth of cheese? Why would he trade 100 euros if he only wants to buy 80 euros worth of cheese? He must want the rest of the money for something, otherwise he would have only traded 80 euros. And if he isn't going to use the extra dollars to purchase goods from the U.S., then the only other thing he can do with the money is invest in the U.S. He could open a savings account in a U.S. bank, buy U.S. government bonds, or buy stocks and bonds in American companies. So his other 20 euros will be exchanged to make these investments. The result here is a trade deficit. The U.S. is now exporting $20 less than it's importing. We exported $80 worth of cheese, but imported $100 worth of chocolate. That's what a trade deficit means. But remember, we also have another $20 worth of capital invested in American companies to balance it out. Every dollar of the trade deficit is met with $1 in foreign investments, which contributes to GDP.
There are two kinds of demand here. There's transaction demand. That's where Bob and Hans want to exchange money to buy the stuff they want in each other's countries. And there's speculative demand, which is what made Hans want to take his 20 euros and invest them in the American economy in dollars. Speculative demand basically says that people will demand currency that holds its value. With the cheese, Hans isn't concerned about his $80 holding its value because he's given that up for something else, the cheese. But with the $20 he has invested, he's concerned about holding its value. If his investment yields 5% annually, but inflation is 3%, he's only making 2% per year. If inflation is 5%, he's not making anything. And if it's more, he's losing out.
In this case, Hans's speculative demand will go away. What happens now? Up until now, the exchange rate between the dollar and the euro has been 1-to-1. But now, Hans only wants the 80 euros worth of cheese. He doesn't want to invest the 20 euros in American companies. Now we have a disparity. Bob wants to spend more on euros than Hans wants to spend on dollars. Since now we have $100 chasing 80 euros, the exchange rate gets adjusted to balance it out. What's happened is that euros are now more in demand than dollars are. Why? Because now Hans doesn't want to have investment holdings in dollars. He's going to have his investments in euros or some other currency. So in order to balance out the disparity, Hans's 80 euros will now buy $100, and Bob's $100 will only get him 80 euros. The dollar has been devalued in the foreign market. The dollar is now valued at $1.25 to the euro.
So when our government prints money to run a deficit and the dollar gets devalued, speculative demand drops, and not as many people outside the U.S. are willing to invest in dollars. Then our so-called leaders look at the foreign exchange market and shout, "Hooray! We've reduced the trade deficit!" But at what cost? Our dollars don't buy as much as they used to, and businesses in the U.S. have less money invested in them. Are you really telling me this is better than a trade deficit? The trade deficit is really just more fear-mongering, and it's a convenient excuse to get people to agree with the government devaluing the dollar. The solution is to not be duped, to have a strong dollar based on sound money. And when you hear all this scary talk about the trade deficit, remember those 4 words. The 4 words I've been closing off every video with. Those 4 simple but very powerful words. I am not afraid.